Human and biodiversity crisis. The Earth is facing a dual crisis of rapid climate change and unprecedented biodiversity loss. Biodiversity is a concept that's commonly referenced yet regularly misunderstood. The complex term not only refers to the mind-blogging variety of life on Earth, but to how everything from genes to entire ecosystem, like coral reefs, interact to make the planet habitable. The bad news, clear, the compelling science, shows that biodiversity is deteriorating worldwide at a faster rate than at any in human history. The reports estimates that as many as 1 million plant and animal species are currently threatened with extinction. That's nearly 11.5% of the estimated 8.7 million global species. Put in terms of global human population, it would like losing the populations of United States, Mexico, Canada, United Kingdom. Not only are the species themselves at risk, so is everything connected to them. These species are all tied in intricate webs of life serving purposes beyond their mere existence. The ecosystem services provided by diverse species are crucial to the survival of life within their spheres of influence, especially our own survival. Among other things, biodiversity supports food security, dietary health, and livelihood sustainability, provides important resources for medical research, plays an important role in regulating infectious diseases, has social, cultural, and spiritual importance, is essential for climate change adaptation, and can reduce disaster risk and support relief and recovery efforts. Every living thing, from microorganisms on human skin to behemoth blue whales in the ocean, plays an integral role in supporting life on the planet. So, for example, losing a single insect species may not seem a big deal, yet every loss in nature is akin to pulling another wooden block from a Jenga game. Remove enough pieces to the tower, or in this case, the biosphere, the living layer of planet Earth that supports life as we know it collapses. Traditionally, ecologists have measured biodiversity, a general term for the variety of species present in the biosphere, by taking into account both numbers of species and their commonness. Biodiversity can be estimated at a number of levels of organization of living things. These estimation indexes, which come from information theory, are most useful as the first step in quantifying biodiversity between and within ecosystems. Yet, they are less useful with the main concern among conservation biologists is simply the loss of biology. However, biologists recognize that the measures of biodiversity in terms of species diversity may help focus effort to preserve biologically or technologically important elements of biodiversity. The Lake Victoria collectives provide an example through which we can begin to understand biodiversity. The biologist studying cichlids in the 1980s discovered hundreds of cichlid species representing a variety of specialization to particular habitat types and specific feeding strategies. Eating plankton floating in the water, scraping and then eating algae from rocks, eating insect larvae from the bottom, and eating the eggs of other species of cyclid. The cyclids of Lake Victoria are the product of adaptive radiation. At the time biologists were making this discovery, some species began to quickly disappear. A culprit in these declines was a species of large fish that was introduced to Lake Victoria by fisheries to feed the living people around the lake. The Nile perch was introduced in 1963 but was not a problem until the 1980s when its population began to surge by consuming cichlids, driving species after the disappearance of species. In fact, there were several factors that played a role in the extinction of perhaps 200 cichlid species in Lake Victoria. Scientists generally accept that the term biodiversity describes the number and kinds of species in a location or on the planet. Species can be difficult to define, but most biologists still feel comfortable with the concept and are able to identify and count eukaryotic species in most contexts. Biologists have also identified alternate measures of biodiversity, some of which are important for planning how to preserve biodiversity. Genetic diversity is one of the alternative concepts. Genetic diversity or variation is the raw material for adaptation in a species. A species' future potential for adaptation depends on the genetic diversity held in the genomes of the individual populations that make up the species. The same is true for higher taxonomic categories. A genus with very different types of species will have more genetic diversity than a genus with species that look alike and have similar ecologies. If there were a choice between one of the genera of species being preserved, the one with the greatest potential for subsequent evolution is the most genetically diverse one. It would be ideal not to have to make such choices, but increasingly this may be the norm. Many genes code for proteins which in turn carry out the metabolic process that keep organisms alive and reproducing. Genetic diversity can be measured as chemical diversity in that different species produce a variety of chemicals in their cells, both the proteins as well as the products of byproducts of metabolism. This chemical diversity has potential benefit for humans as a source of pharmaceuticals, so it provides one way to measure diversity that is important to human health and welfare. Humans have generated diversity in domesticated animals, plants, and fungi. This diversity is also suffering losses because of migration, market forces, and increasing globalism in agriculture, especially heavily populated regions such as China, India, and Japan. The human population directly depends on this diversity as a stable food source. Its decline is troubling the two biologists and agricultural scientists. It also useful to define ecosystem diversity, the number of different ecosystems on the planet or in a given geographic area. Whole ecosystem can disappear even if some of the species might survive by adapting to their ecosystems. The loss of an ecosystem means the loss of interaction between species, the loss of unique features of co-adaptation. An example of a largely intact ecosystem in North America is a prairie ecosystem. Despite considerable effort, knowledge of the species that inhabit the planet is limited. A recent estimate suggests that the number of identified eukaryote species, about 1